Hey beautiful people, hello and welcome to my channel. Today I will show you how I draw male nude studies with watercolor. I will be painting black models, so I will use this great opportunity to talk about how I choose and mix colors to paint a beautiful and lively dark skin. Watch this video till the end and I will share with you my tips on mixing beautiful dark colors without any muddiness. For this artwork, I will use the SMLT 100% cotton watercolor paper, which is really great. You will find a link to the store that sells it in the video description. The brand is not sponsoring me, I just really love to use this paper myself, and it's relatively cheap compared to other pure cotton brands, so I recommend it to you wholeheartedly. By the way, don't forget to push the bell button and subscribe to my channel, so you will always know when I post new videos with art advice and other great stuff. First of all, I start with sketching. I like to say that my watercolor is as good as my sketch, of course if I'm doing some figurative art. So I try to make my sketches as clean as possible. I prefer to sketch with a soft pencil, B2 or softer, since it's easier to vary the darkness of my marks, from very light to really dark and prominent. As you can see, I started sketching with the basic overall shape of the figure, without any details or anatomy, only suggestion the gesture lines and a pose. I prefer to use this method quite often when I do watercolors, since it helps me to avoid unnecessary lines and mud from eraser, which can happen if I were using a basic skeleton construction. After I'm done with the shape, I simply draw my figure within it, adjusting the proportions where it's needed. Please take notice that this method is better used when you have at least some basic knowledge of anatomy, otherwise you might get confused. I use it so easily because I'm not a rookie when it comes to drawing artistic nudes. But once you know the basics, it works very well to both save time and paper from too much erasing. When I do my sketch from reference or from live model, I try to avoid thinking something like I have to draw a forearm or a biceps or a torso. Instead, I focus on shape, negative space, angles, and how they all correspond to each other more than on which exact part of the body I am drawing. Therefore, I train to draw what I see more than what I think I must draw. I observe my reference and seek for the hints on how to grasp the proportions right. And for that, the shape between the hip and the torso of my model can sometimes work better than my knowledge about the structure of the limbs themselves. I try to always check the whole picture and not to focus for too long on separate parts of my drawings. When you draw something from scratch, mistakes are inevitable, and of course sometimes I do mess up my drawing, so I need to erase some lines carefully, and for this I use a kneadable eraser. It is soft, you can shape it into any form you need, even a very narrow one, and it doesn't damage the paper as much as regular erasers. Since my goal is to keep the paper structure intact, it's honestly a game changer. The only thing that could possibly work better than this is the undo button, or being able to tap your fingers twice. Oh, and I try to do this all the time. Does this happen to you too? When overall figure is established, I darken some lines to outline the muscles and suggest shadows. The dark grey of the pencil lines will blend in with the shadow color and add depth and contrast to the finished picture. I sketch in another figure, challenging myself to use a more difficult angle, which includes foreshortening. Oh, don't I like to make things more difficult for myself? Don't we all? An eternal artist problem. I really enjoy placing many figures on my page when I do studies, both because it's a nice way to experiment with various poses, and also because it makes me think how to tie them all together and how to use the free space effectively, so the result looks balanced and enjoyable for the eyes. even if it's just a study. Though in addition to that, I must say that you don't have to always try to make your pictures look perfect. Yes, studies are meant to learn from them and to think and plan and to try to work on composition as much as on the subject of the study. But there's also nothing wrong about just going crazy and drawing the way you feel without any restrictions, any limits to your creative flow and your imagination. Just me, I really tend to overcomplicate things and make my drawings look pretty almost all the time, and somehow it's rather difficult for me to go the other way around and just to go loose, so probably I will do this in one of my next videos, so come back to watch me do this. I think this will be the subject of my next, well, maybe tutorial, maybe just a video. People often ask me how did I learn anatomy and what books or courses helped me the most. I must say that my favorite teachers are Proco and Will Weston. I feel my art intelligence level goes up just from scrolling their Instagram pages. I learned so much from them, but what can't be underestimated is real-life practice. I attended 3 live drawing sessions in Budapest, where I live for now almost a year and a half, and it was the best thing I could do to learn drawing nudes and anatomy in general. At first I felt a bit awkward and I was anxious about sharing my nude studies with public. But with time and practice, this Puritan mindset was defeated and I learned to cherish the beauty of human body as something that I want to draw and share with others. I think that drawing nudes also helped me to love myself more and to get rid of some self-hatred concerning my dysphoria. This place where I went to attend live sessions, it was such an open and diverse place with so many different people attending the classes, and during those classes I've drawn so many different body types, skin colors, people with various gender identities, sexual orientation and cultural background, and it really was a mind-opening and very healing experience. I know a lot of people who don't feel comfortable drawing nudes, and of course, to each their own, though to me it's a very liberating thing. It really helps me to perceive my own body in a much more positive way. Adding a third pose was the most difficult of them all, since I didn't really have much space left to play with, and it made me think of what options I have. But it's interesting that the first pose turned up to be the most difficult for me, even though it seems quite simple. Now when I edit this video and the picture is finished, honestly I can see that I could have and should have planned the composition better, since it leans a little bit too much towards the right part of the page and the left corner is a bit too empty, but I will try to balance this later with colored strokes. But anyway, those study pages don't have to look perfect, they don't even have to look pretty, they are meant for studying. So if you see something you could have done better, just take a mental note and pat yourself on the back for learning something. At least that's what I do. Finally, when all the 3 figures are ready and my sketch is done, I can move on to my favorite part of it all, painting. For this study, I use my custom-made palette, which is my main working horse, or so I call it. It mostly consists of Daniel Smith watercolors with few colors by Mijello, Van Gogh and Rembrandt. I prefer to use tubes because I find it more cost efficient and comfortable, since I can pull out just as much paint as I need into my palette. The main logic of how I set up my palette is that I try to avoid opaque pigments and always have basic colors in cool and warm pairs. Cool and warm blue, cool and warm yellow, etc. I do use Pyrrole Orange, since it's pretty hard to mix an orange this saturated, and I can't imagine my palette without Payne's Grey and a very saturated greenish yellow. Mine comes from Mijello. The most intriguing thing about dark skin color for me is that while being dark, it's not monotonous. well, neither is fair skin, but it's probably not as obvious with the dark color because it reflects less light. So that's why it's a little bit harder to see the transitions of color in it. It's not just brown or dark brown, it is colorful in its own specific, beautiful way. Dark skin has many undertones and they vary on each body part and with each person. With watercolors, I always try to use the variety of colors and hues so they mix with each other and create interest. Except from Burnt Sienna by Daniel Smith and Sepia by Van Gogh, I don't use any browns. I prefer to mix them myself and to construct them out of other colors, because this helps me to avoid dullness and muddiness. So I don't have any other earthly tones in my palette. As you can see, the first wash is pretty light, though I make it much more saturated than I would go with a lighter skin. Most of it will work either as an undertone or a highlight, since with watercolor I go from light to dark. That's why it's so important to plan ahead where my lightest lights will be and leave out the white of the paper in those spots. Of course, I can always use white gouache later on to add some highlights, but they don't usually look as organic and pristine white as the paper. For this first wash, I use some blues and violets, some greens and yellows. It might seem at first as total color chaos, but when it all will be unified together with the second and third washes, those different colors shining through will make the skin look vibrant and lively, so don't be afraid of experimenting and add some crazy color variation in the first wash. It might seem weird, but in the end you will see how nicely it will work out. Since I know I will for sure be using reddish browns later on, I need some greens and blues to highlight them, because together they really work very well. I mix the pigments on the palette before using them, calming down the colors a little bit and harmonizing them, because if I will use them right as they are, they would probably be too bright, too saturated. But I also try to allow them to mix on the paper as well, and this paper is amazingly forgiving for this technique, that's why I love it so much. Then I add some of the reddish brown color with a wet on wet method to let it blend in well with other colors. Yet I keep some of the lightest areas untouched. They will be my highlights in the end. One of the best advices I could give you is to always keep a piece of paper tissue nearby when you paint, because it's so handy for removing some extra color or any mistake when it's still wet. Sometimes when I forget my supply of tissues, I just end up running around like crazy looking for it to try to correct some mistake I made until it's too late. So don't be like me. Make your tissue supplies beforehand. When I add some orange reds, it feels like those guys look unnaturally orange, but that's the magic of watercolor when you use the layering method. Different colors blend with each other when you put them one on top of another, and when they dry, they work perfectly well in ensemble. As you can see, I don't use any browns or earthly colors. I mostly mix red, green, some yellows and oranges and a hint of violet all together to establish a color palette that is orchestrated in a way that overall impression of color tends to be brown, but in reality it's a variety of different colors and hues that make it look like this. It helps avoid dullness and muddiness. If I would simply use some monotonous brown color without making it interesting and without mixing it with other colors, after drying it will lose saturation and look a little bit dull. Of course you can do this if this fits you, like you do you, but like this is my method to create an interesting color solution for the painting. I add some greenish blues to the background because it will help the reddish brown figure to pop out. With a third wash, I dip in the shadows and add the darkest darks. What is also a very good tip and an important thing to pay attention to is the rhythm of values. If one leg is dark, the other one should be lighter. If something is warmer in hue, something next to it should be colder. I always try to avoid losing interest in making any object seem too much like the other one. To keep the viewer's eyes interested, I make them go from dark to light and so on. As you can see, I try to unify the figures with light greenish blue washes here and there around them in the background, so they seem to belong to one space and color atmosphere. In the end, I add some finishing touches, texture and contrast with Faber Castell colored pencils. I really like this mixed media technique, and I often give my watercolors some polish with pencils. I hope this video was helpful and interesting. Please like it, and if you have any questions, you can always leave them in the comment section. This video wouldn't be possible without the support of my patrons who voted for me to make it. If you want to have a say in what videos and tutorials I make monthly, support me on Patreon and help me create more valuable content for everyone. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day. See you.